Did you know that the secret to living longer, eating better, and regaining control of your life isn't in a diet, a pill, or a workout plan? What if this secret was over 1,000 years old and hidden on the oldest islands on the planet? There is an island in Japan, a small, warm island at the southern tip of the Japanese archipelago. Its name is Okinawa. Okinawa is not famous for having the largest hospitals in the world. It is not famous for having the best doctors, the most advanced technologies, or the most expensive medicines. This island is famous for something else, for having one of the highest concentrations of centenarians on the planet, people over 100 years old. Not just alive, active, working in the garden, dancing at festivals, cooking for their families, smiling. Western researchers arrived in Okinawa wanting to understand what is the secret: genetics, climate, water. And when they went to study the culture, the habits, the lifestyle of these people, they found something that none of them expected. It wasn't a pill. It wasn't a diet with a fancy name. It was a phrase, a short, simple phrase that the people of Okinawa have repeated before every meal for centuries. Hara Hachi Bu, 8 parts out of 10. Or in a free translation, stop eating when you're 80% full. That's all, simple as that. But there's one detail that will change the way you think about food, about control, about excess, about your own life. This phrase isn't just about food. It's about a completely different way of living, a philosophy that transcends cultures, transcends centuries, and that modern neuroscience can explain scientifically. And today I'm going to tell you the story of a man who learned this the hard way. A man who lost control, who almost lost everything, and who found in Japan's oldest teaching the answer he never expected. This phrase isn't just about food. But before I tell you this story, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, click the subscribe button, leave a like on this video. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people who need this content. This phrase isn't just about food. Tell me below, do you have a healthy relationship with food? Do you eat mindfully with presence, or do you eat on autopilot without even realizing how much you've already eaten? I really want to read your reply. Now, let's get to the story. Chapter 1. The man who ate his own life. Oliver was 40 years old. He had a good job, a house, a family he loved. It was a body that was crying out for help. It wasn't something that happened suddenly. It was silent, gradual, invisible, like the tide rising slowly without you realizing that the water is already up to your knees. Oliver worked as a project manager at a medium-sized construction company. He woke up at 5:45 in the morning. When everything went well, he arrived home between 7 and 8:00 p.m. 3 children: Luca is 11 years old, Mia 8, and little Theo 4. His wife Mary was a nurse. She worked shifts. On the days she was home, she tried. She cooked, organized, tried to create a routine for the children. On the days she wasn't there, the house turned into a survival camp. Oliver loved Mary. He loved his children. He had no doubt about that, but there was one thing he couldn't say he loved more: food. It wasn't hunger, not in the biological sense, it was something else. When his boss rejected the project he'd spent weeks developing, Oliver would stop at the drive-thru on his way home. When there were road rage incidents, when deadlines loomed, when the bills didn't add up at the end of the month, Oliver would eat pizza after a horrible day, French fries while driving, ice cream while watching TV after the kids went asleep, dessert he didn't need at a restaurant where he wasn't even hungry. The food was a place where he didn't need to perform. He didn't need to be the strong father, the present husband, the competent manager. He could just feel. He could simply exist in that moment of pleasure, of comfort, of relief. The problem is that this comfort came at a price. At 38 years old, Oliver weighed 108 kilos. He was 1.78 m tall. The health insurance doctor looked at the test results and said, "We need to talk about your triglycerides," in that voice of someone being polite but actually scared. Oliver thanked them, left the doctor's office, and on his way back to work stopped at Burger King. Chapter 2. What the family saw Mary go away. She saw Oliver come home exhausted and go straight to the refrigerator before even taking off his coat. She saw him serve himself and go back to the pan without thinking. She saw him finish dinner and be on the sofa with a packet of biscuits. She didn't say anything because when she tried to speak, it turned into a fight and she was too tired to fight. But there was one scene she couldn't get out of her head. It was a Sunday afternoon. Theo, the youngest, was in the backyard wanting to play soccer. He stood at the door of the office where Oliver was working. Yes, on a Sunday with a little ball in his hand. Dad, soccer. Oliver looked at his son. Then he looked at the screen, then back at his son again. Not today, son. Your father is tired. Theo stood still for a second. Then he turned and went to play by himself. Mary, who was in the hallway, saw everything. She felt a lump in her throat. That night, after the children were asleep, she sat on the edge of the bed next to Oliver. She didn't talk about his weight, she didn't talk about his diet, she didn't talk about his tests. She simply said, Theo waited for you all afternoon. You know, he kept asking every half hour if you were going to finish soon. Oliver didn't answer, he just stared at the ceiling. I don't know what's happening to you, Ollie, but I know you're disappearing and the boys are noticing it. Silence. I've scheduled an appointment for you next week. Please go. Mary, I already went to the doctor. They gave me a list of things to cut out of my diet, and that's not the kind of doctor. Chapter 3, The Doctor's Office Without Medicine. Doctor. Maury's office didn't look like an office at all. It looked more like the office of someone who had read every book in the world and had the wisdom to put only the most important ones on the shelf. The room was small, organized with a window overlooking a well-kept garden, no anatomy posters, no hospital smell, just wood, greenery outside, and silence. Doctor was a Japanese American, the son of Okinawan immigrants, a physician trained at Johns Hopkins, but with an unusual specialization, integrative medicine, focusing on eating behavior and Eastern philosophies applied to health. He entered the room with the calm of someone who was in no hurry for anything. Oliver sat with his arms crossed in the posture of a man who had been forced to be there. Oliver, you can call me doctor. Feel free. Oliver introduced himself with the efficiency of someone in a business meeting. Name, age, weight, history, previous diet attempts. Doctor might listen to everything without interrupting. When Oliver finished, he remained silent for about 3 seconds. You've told me a lot about your body. Now tell me something about yourself. Oliver blinked. What do you mean when you eat more than you need? How are you feeling at that moment before you eat? I mean, long pause, tired, frustrated, sometimes angry. And after eating, better for a while, doctor. Nodded slowly as if this answer confirmed something he already knew. Oliver, I could give you a list of allowed and forbidden foods right now. You'd leave here with an 1,800 calorie plan, a macronutrient chart, and a referral to a nutritionist. Oliver waited for the but you know how this ends. You told me yourself, 4 attempts. 4 times you tried this path, and 4 times when stress, fatigue, and frustration came, the plan fell apart. So what are you going to do differently? Oliver asked. There was a hint of cynicism in his voice. Doctor smiled slightly. I'm going to teach you something that the people of Okinawa teach their children even before they can read. Something so simple that you'll think I'm wasting your time. Chapter 4, Hara Hachi Bu, the 80% rule. Hara Hachi Bu. Doctor wrote the 3 words on a piece of paper and pushed it toward Oliver. In Japanese, it literally means 80% belly. The practice of stopping eating when you are 80% full before reaching total satiety. Oliver looked at the paper, then at the doctor. Is that all? This is the beginning of everything. Dr. Mori stood up and walked to the window. Okinawa is an island in southern Japan. For decades, researchers have studied its inhabitants, trying to understand why they live so long, and they found this principle at the heart of their culture. It's not a diet. There's no list of forbidden foods, there's no calorie counting, it's just this: stop before you're completely full. But how do you know when it's 80% full? Oliver asked. It was a legitimate question. That's exactly the right question. The doctor returned to his chair. You don't know, not at first, because you've probably never paid attention to it in your life. That hit Oliver in a way he hadn't expected. Think about it. Your brain takes approximately 20 minutes to receive the signal from your stomach that it's full. 20 minutes. If you eat quickly, and most Americans do, you go past the point of satiety before you even realize it. You eat until you're 120%, 130% full, and only realize it when you're already uncomfortable. Okinawans have learned over generations to eat slowly enough to feel that signal coming, to pause before the end, to respect their bodies before they need to scream. Oliver remained silent, processing it all. And does that really make a difference scientifically? Dr. Mai opened a drawer and pulled out a sheet of paper with data. A 40-year-old man who on average eats 20% more than he needs at each meal over the course of a year is ingesting the equivalent of hundreds of extra meals without realizing it. Without feeling that he is overdoing it just because he hasn't learned to listen to his own body. Oliver looked at the numbers and something inside him began to make sense. Chapter 5, it's not just about eating, doctor, but I understand the scientific part. The problem is that I don't eat because I'm hungry. I eat for other reasons, I know, so how does this rule solve that? Dr. Mori crossed his arms with a thoughtful expression. Oliver Hara Hachi Bu isn't just instruction about food. It's a philosophy about moderation, about the relationship between desire and need, about knowing the difference between what you want and what you need. He stood up again. Doctor was the type of person who thinks better in motion. In Japan, this idea of conscious moderation permeates everything. There's a concept called ma, which means space, pause, interval. The Japanese believe that the space between things is as important as the things themselves. The silence between notes is as important as the music. And in terms of eating, this space is the moment before putting more food on the plate. It's the pause between one bite and another. It's the second in which you ask yourself, am I still hungry? Or am I eating to escape something? Oliver felt that question land on him with a weight he hadn't expected. And there's more. In China, traditional medicine works with the balance of what they call kai, the vital energy. They teach that excess of food, emotion, or effort blocks this flow. That the body functions best when it is not overloaded, that moderation is not weakness, it is wisdom. In Korea, there's a practice called nuni. The ability to read the environment, to perceive what's happening around you. At the table, this means eating at the rhythm of the meal, paying attention to your own body without letting external impulses, stress, habit, or anxiety dictate how much you eat. Oliver was listening with an attention he rarely devoted to anything. What these cultures have in common is something that the modern West has completely lost. The idea that eating is a conscious act, not an automatic response, not an escape, an active presence of attention, of respect for one's own body. Silence. Oliver, you don't need to stop eating what you like, you need to start paying attention while you eat, and that changes everything. Doctor. Brian Wansink, a researcher of eating behavior at Cornell University, has spent decades studying why people eat more than they need, and what he discovered is disturbing in its simplicity. In one of his most famous experiments, he served soup in bowls that were refilled under the table without the participants knowing. People continued eating well beyond the point of satiety simply because the bowl wasn't empty. The stop signal didn't come from the body, it came from the eye. He concluded most people don't know when they're full, they eat until something external tells them to stop. The empty plate, the finished package, the TV program ending, Hara Hachi Bu is precisely the antidote to this. It transfers control from the external to the internal, from the plate to the body, from habit to consciousness. Nutritionist and researcher Dr. Michelle May, author of the book Eat What You Love, Love What You Eat, describes the state that Hara Hachi Bu seeks as mindful eating. And she documents that people who practice this regularly not only eat less but report greater satisfaction with their meals. They eat less and enjoy more. Because when you eat slowly, mindfully, without distractions, you truly savor the flavor, you truly live in the moment. The experience becomes richer, not poorer. From a hormonal standpoint, Dr. David Kessler, former commissioner of the American FDA, explains that the stress eating cycle is related to dopamine, the neurotransmitter of anticipated pleasure. When you are under pressure, your brain seeks quick sources of dopamine, and highly palatable foods full of sugar, fat, and salt trigger this response powerfully. But here's the key detail. Dopamine is involved in anticipation, not satiety. The real pleasure begins to diminish after the first few bites. You keep eating, seeking a pleasure that has already passed. This explains why you can eat a whole package of cookies and still not feel satisfied. Hara Hachi Bu interrupts this cycle not through willpower but through awareness. Chapter 6. The First Meal, Doctor. Mori sent Oliver home with a task, just one. At your next meal, I want you to do the following. When you reach the middle of your plate, stop, put your fork down, take 3 deep breaths and ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? Just that, that's all. You don't need to stop eating. You don't need to change what's on your plate, just pause, observe. Oliver thought that was ridiculously simple. That night, Mary made pasta, his favorite dish. The children were at the table. Theo was trying to stack pasta on his fork with the seriousness of an engineer. Lucas and Mia were arguing about which character was stronger in some video game. Oliver helped himself. He began to eat, and in the middle of the dish, he stopped. He placed his fork on the table. He breathed and he realized 3 things he had never noticed before. First, he was chewing too fast. Almost not chewing, actually, swallowing. Second, he wasn't tasting anything. He was eating the same pasta Mary had been making for 10 years and couldn't tell how the seasoning was. Third, he was looking at his cell phone. In the middle of dinner with his family, he was looking at work emails. When he took his eyes off his phone and looked at the table, he actually saw Theo trying to get his attention for at least a minute with a fork full of spaghetti, hoping his father would look. Oliver placed the phone face down. That's great, Theo, you did it. The boy's face broke into a smile that Oliver couldn't look at without feeling a pang in his chest. He didn't eat less that night, but he ate differently, with attention, with presence. And when he finished, he noticed he was satisfied, not uncomfortably full, as was usual. Satisfied. Chapter 7. The battle royal, but Oliver would be the first to admit that things hadn't gotten easy. The following week, the worst project of his career blew up in his face. A dissatisfied client, an impossible deadline, an overworked team. Thursday night, Oliver arrived home at 9:00 p.m., the children already asleep, Mary on call. He opened the refrigerator and he ate not a little, quite a lot. Leftovers from dinner, cheese, that piece of pie that had been sitting around since the weekend, standing in front of the open refrigerator in the darkness of the kitchen. When he stopped, he had that familiar feeling, heavy, uncomfortable, and now on top of everything else, angry at himself. He sat at the kitchen table for a while and he thought about what Dr. had said. All you're going to slip, that's not a possibility, it's a certainty. The question isn't how to avoid slipping, the question is what you do afterward. He picked up his cell phone and texted the doctor. It was 10 p.m. I failed today. I was stressed and ate much more than I should have. The answer came surprisingly quickly considering the time. That's not a failure, that's data. What happened before you opened the refrigerator? Oliver thought. He typed, I was stressed about a company project. I felt like I was going to lose control of the situation. And did the food help you? Break for about 10 minutes, then I started feeling worse. Okay. So what was the food trying to do for you during those 10 minutes? Oliver stared at the question for a long time. It gave me the feeling that I was in control of something. Exactly. When everything outside is chaotic, the act of eating, of picking up, chewing, swallowing gives an immediate sense of agency, of control that's profoundly human, Oliver. It's not weakness. But Hara Hachi Bu isn't about willpower. It's about replacing that false control with real control. The question you'll learn to ask yourself before opening the refrigerator at a moment like this is, what do I really need right now? But here's something Dr. Mori said in one of the subsequent consultations that completely changed Oliver's perspective, and it will change yours too. There's a Japanese concept called ikki. You've probably heard of it. It's often translated as reason for living, but the best interpretation of ikigai, which I've already talked about here on the channel, is a more everyday, more practical one. The people of Okinawa don't think of ikigai as a grand purpose in life. They think of it as the reason for getting out of bed in the morning, the small specific thing that makes the day meaningful. And here's the connection that Dr. Mai made that Oliver never forgot. When a person loses connection with their own ikigai, with the things that give meaning to the day, that person begins to seek substitutes. Alcohol, overwork, social media, and food. Not because they are weak, but because human beings need meaning. And when meaning is obscured by tiredness, stress, and mechanical routine, the body seeks anything to fill that void. Oliver remained silent for a long moment. So you're saying the problem isn't the food, food is the symptom. The problem is the disconnection. This kept echoing in Oliver's head for days. Chapter 8. Learning to feel. In the following weeks, Doctor introduced Oliver to something he called body listening, the practice of pausing in the middle of each meal and asking 3 simple questions. How was I feeling before I started eating? How am I feeling right now in the middle of it all? What do I really need right now? It wasn't meditation or therapy. It was just mindfulness. And Oliver began to notice patterns he had never seen before. When he was angry, really angry, angry at work, angry about a situation, he would eat quickly. He would attack his plate. He would chew forcefully music as if he were punishing the food. When he was sad or lonely, he would eat slowly, almost tenderly, as if the food were a hug. When he was well, truly well, present, at peace, he ate less, effortlessly. He simply stopped when he was satisfied because he didn't need any more. Those observations were like learning a new language, the language of one's own body. Oh, you're beginning to understand, Doctor. Mori said during one of the consultations. The Japanese have an expression, haratsu. It literally means the stomach rises. It's the expression they use to describe anger. It's no coincidence that the word for anger is the same part of the body where you eat. In ancient Japan, there was a deep understanding that emotion and digestion are connected. Is this real? Scientifically, the gut has more neurons than the spinal cord. It produces 95% of your body's serotonin. Researchers today call it the second brain. So when you say you feel anger in your stomach, you're being more accurate than you think. Chapter 9. The dinner that changed everything. 3 months after the first consultation, Mary organized a family dinner. It wasn't anyone's birthday. It wasn't a holiday. She simply decided to have a special meal on a Friday night with candles on the table, the nice china that was saved for special occasions. The children thought it was strange. Why is there a candle, Mom? Because we can. Oliver arrived home from work and found this. The table was set, the house smelled of delicious food, and his 3 children were waiting. He paused in the kitchen doorway for a second, and he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Something that didn't have an exact name, a kind of "this is what matters." During dinner, he ate slowly because he wanted to savor it. He wanted to be there. Lucas told a long story about a school friend with so many details that no one could follow the thread. Mia kept trying to convince her mother that dogs should be allowed to sit at the dinner table. Theo fell asleep at the table before dessert, his fork still in his hand. Oliver looked at the scene and he stopped eating, because I was satisfied in a way that no amount of food had ever produced. Mary looked at him across the table. She saw his plate still covered in food. She saw his expression and she smiled. That specific smile that only appeared when she knew something important was happening. Later, when the children were asleep, she asked, "How are you?" "Different," he replied, and he couldn't explain it any better than that, but she understood. Chapter 10. The stumbling blocks that teach. Oliver would be dishonest if he said it was a straight line of progress. It was the week of the launch of the company's most important project. He slept poorly, ate poorly, and on Friday he stopped at a bakery and bought more than he needed. He ate it all in the car. It was his mother-in-law's birthday, where the table was overflowing with delicious food and he lost count. There was that night when Lucas had a high fever and stayed awake until 3:00 a.m. And when the boy finally fell asleep, Oliver went to the kitchen and ate ice cream straight from the tub. But something had changed before. Every slip turned into a spiral. "Since I ate this, so be it. I'll start again tomorrow," and tomorrow never came. Now, after each slip-up, Oliver practiced what Dr. Mori called return without judgment. Not ignoring what happened, not punishing himself, just looking, understanding, and moving on. In Japanese culture, Dr. Mori had explained there is the concept of kaizen, continuous improvement through small steps. Perfection is not required, direction is required. You don't need to be perfect today. You need to be a little better than yesterday, and when you slip, and you will slip, you just need to get back on track. And wabi-sabi, he continued, the philosophy of imperfect beauty reminds us that the crack doesn't destroy. Sometimes that's exactly where the light enters. Oliver kept that and he used it many times. Chapter 11. What happened to the body? 6 months after the first consultation, Oliver returned to the health insurance doctor, the same one who had looked at the tests with concern. The doctor looked at the new test results, then at Oliver, then at the test results again. What did you do? I learned to stop eating when I was 80% full. The doctor frowned. He had been expecting to hear about diet, supplements, surgery. Just that I learned to eat mindfully, to pause, to ask myself why I was eating before I ate. Oliver had lost 14 kilos in 6 months without restrictive diets, without counting calories, without cutting out any food groups. My triglyceride levels had normalized. My blood pressure was under control, but what Oliver described to the doctor wasn't about numbers. I sleep better, I have more energy. I can play with my children without getting out of breath after 2 minutes. My mind is clearer at work, and you know what's even stranger? I still eat things I like. Pizza on Fridays, ice cream sometimes, but I eat differently. Clears throat, I eat mindfully and I eat less naturally, effortlessly. The doctor was silent for a moment. You should give a lecture. Oliver chuckled. No, but maybe I should have dinner with my children more often. But there's a detail in this story that Oliver only discovered much later, a detail that Dr. My purposefully kept for the right moment. Okinawa, the island where Hara Hachi Bu originated, has undergone a transformation in recent decades. With globalization, the arrival of fast food, and the influence of American culture, especially after World War II, when American military bases were established on the island. The eating habits of young Okinawans have changed, and with them the health indicators. The younger generation in Okinawa today doesn't live as long as their grandparents, not because genetics have changed, because habits have changed, because Hara Hachi Bu was abandoned. This is both devastating and hopeful. Devastating because it shows that no cultural heritage can withstand neglect. Hopeful because it shows that the problem was never genetic, never destiny, never something beyond our control. It was always a choice made or not made at every meal. Chapter 12. What Oliver learned about control. A year after starting with Dr. Oliver was having a different kind of conversation with the doctor. It wasn't about food anymore. It was about work. About how Oliver realized that the same patterns that led him to overeat appeared in other areas of his life. He worked himself to exhaustion because he didn't know how to stop. I accepted more projects than I could deliver because I didn't know how to say no. I stayed on my phone until midnight because I couldn't disconnect. Hara Hachi Bu doctor, it's everywhere, doctor. Mori smiled like someone who had been expecting that observation for months. Now you understand the 80% rule isn't just about food. It's about your relationship with excess, with the idea that more is always better, with the difficulty of stopping when something is good enough. In Japan, this wisdom is everywhere. In the Zen garden, where empty space is as important as the stones in the tea ceremony, where every gesture is calculated without excess. In architecture, where minimalism is not poverty, but respect for the essential. The modern West has built a civilization around more, faster, bigger, fuller, and the result is an epidemic of excess, not only of food, but of information, work, consumption, and stimulation. Hara Hachi Bu invites you to ask the most subversive question in modern culture. Is enough already enough? Oliver pondered that question for a long time. Chapter 13. What Mary Saw. Mary had always been the silent observer of Oliver's transformation. She saw when he started placing his cell phone face down at dinner. She saw when he started serving his plate and not immediately returning it to the pan. She saw when he started getting up from the table without finishing everything and doing so without guilt. But the moment she never forgot was a Sunday afternoon 6 months after it all began. She was at the living room window when she saw Oliver in the backyard with Theo. The two were lying on the lawn looking at the sky. They weren't doing anything. There were no cell phones, no chores, no declared purpose. They were just there, present. Theo said something. Oliver laughed, Theo laughed too. Mary stared for a full minute and she thought, this is the man I married. He hadn't disappeared, he was just buried under layers of tiredness, stress, and excess. And now he was coming back one day at a time, one meal at a time, one choice at a time. That night she said to Oliver, do you know what changed in you? It's not the weight, it's that you're present. You're here. Oliver remained silent and the boys notice. Lucas asked you the other day if you were okay. I asked him why, he asked. He said, because Dad is playing with us again. Now, I want to give a summary of what we talked about today. First point, Hara Hachi Bu, the 80% rule is an ancient Okinawan philosophy that proposes something simple yet revolutionary. Stop eating when you are 80% full. Not when your plate is empty, not when it's uncomfortably full, when you are satisfied enough. Second point, science confirms that the brain takes 20 minutes to receive the satiety signal from the body. When you eat quickly without paying attention, you go past this point without realizing it. The practice of pausing, observing, and asking how am I before continuing to eat is what interrupts this cycle. Third point, this principle isn't unique to Japan. China and Korea have their own versions of this wisdom. The energy balance of traditional Chinese medicine, the Korean nunchai of attention to the environment and one's own body. These are different cultures arriving at the same conclusion. Excess does not serve us. Conscious moderation is the most powerful way to respect one's own life. Fourth point, and perhaps the most important, Hara Hachi Bu is not about willpower. It's not about prohibition. It's about awareness. It's about transferring control from the external, the empty plate, the habit, the anxiety, to the internal, to your own body, to your own presence. Oliver didn't lose weight because he found the perfect diet. He changed because he learned to stop, to listen, to be present. And here's the question I want you to take with you after this video. In the next 24 hours, at some point at lunch, at dinner, at any meal, you're going to stop halfway through your plate. You'll put your fork down, you'll breathe. And you'll ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? Am I hungry? Nor am I feeling something else? You don't need to change anything else today, just this pause, just this question. Oh, and see what happens, because sometimes the most powerful change in your life begins with a breath between bites. If you've made it this far, I want to sincerely thank you. This type of content takes time to create, and knowing that you stayed until the end means a lot. If this video touched you in any way, if you recognized yourself in any part of Oliver's story, if something here made sense to you, subscribe to the channel. Every subscription is a way of saying that this type of content matters, and that motivates me to keep creating. And in the comments below, tell me which part of Oliver's story resonated with you the most. Do you eat because you're hungry or for other reasons? Have you ever tried practicing any form of mindfulness during meals? And if you enjoyed this video, I invite you to watch one of the ones that's appearing on your screen right now. You'll definitely get a great deal out of it. The channel has complimentary content, and each video will take you a step deeper into this journey. Thank you so much for your time, for your attention, for being here. Be present, walk with honor, follow the Balk Belt discipline.